Hi there. In this video, I want to talk about how to design and implement effective workplace happiness initiatives. And I have three topics that I want to go over. First topic is why do they often fail? Why is it that companies often, start something to make employees more happy and either employees just don't participate or they do participate, but it turns out to have no real effect on employee happiness and productivity. Secondly, I want to give you 10 tips on how to avoid that. I've seen a lot of great workplaces succeed with this. So I've seen a lot of what works. I've seen a lot of what doesn't work. And I'd like to share my 10 best tips on this with you. And I want to share a lot of great examples from workplaces who are doing this in practice. If you have any questions, ask me anything in the comments. If you're watching this live, post a comment on the webinar page. If you're watching this later, post a comment on the video, and I'll be happy to write and reply whenever I see it. Um, and why does this topic matter? It's actually very simple. You see, more and more companies are realizing that having happy employees is a great thing. Um, but but they implement these happiness initiatives, but then either people don't show up or it turns out people show up reluctantly and it doesn't really work anyway. I think it's worth avoiding that. I mean, if we're taking the time and the effort and spending the money on any kind of happiness initiatives, we want to do something that actually works and makes a difference. Also, because if we don't, if we keep doing employee happiness initiatives and nobody shows up and then they just like peters out, we condition our employees to think that any future initiatives probably won't last either, so it's not even worth it for them to participate. So having too many initiatives fail can actually be worse than nothing, worse than not doing anything, because it trains people to expect these initiatives to fail. I think that's worth avoiding. So we should definitely try to do the best we can. For me, the quintessential example of a failed happiness initiative is the workplace gym, right? You want your employees to be happy, you want them to be energized, you want them to be in good shape, you want them to be motivated. So you put a gym in the office, and what happens? Nobody goes, or like a few people go, but those are the people who are already in really good shape and are used to working out. They use the gym, and the rest of the time it's just empty like this. I think that is worth avoiding. And by the way, gyms are hugely expensive to create and maintain. So how do we avoid that? How do we make sure that the initiatives we put in place actually work, that people actually participate and actually get something out of them? I had 10 tips, and the tips sort of fall in three phases, right? This just makes sense. There's like the planning and design phase. What are we going to do? When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? There's communication and execution. Once it's out there, how do we make sure that people know about it? How do we make sure that it actually works and is executed in the best possible way? And follow up in evaluation. Super important. You don't just launch an initiative and then you forget all about it. You continuously evaluate those initiatives to make sure that they actually do work, or maybe so that you can improve them and make them even better. And also so that you can learn for future initiatives what works or what doesn't work. So with these three phases in mind, here are my 10 tips on how to make these things work. And I think the first and tips I want to start with is have a chief happiness officer. Put somebody in charge of this process. Everything else that's important in the workplace, somebody's in charge of that, right? The money is important, so there's a chief financial officer. The tech is important, so there's a CTO, a chief technical officer. So if happiness is important, there should be a chief happiness officer. This could be somebody from HR, but it doesn't have to be. But I do think that if we want to be serious and strategic and like intentional about our happiness initiatives in the workplace, somebody should be in charge. A good example is a financial company, a pension company in Copenhagen that we work with called SEB Pension. And they put their head of legal, Helena, volunteered to be the chief happiness officer. And she put in a lot of great initiatives in this workplace. And I should make it very clear that as a chief happiness officer, your job is not to run around in a clown suit and make everybody else happy, right? It's not to go, your job is not to go up to everybody's desk and say, hey, are you happy today? How can I make you happy today? That would honestly be terrible. That would honestly be awful. I see this, the chief happiness officer, as much more of a project manager role. And that's why Helene, head of legal, was so great, because she had like a very structured mind. So it's somebody who can come up with ideas, who can make a plan, follow up on the plan, and celebrate the wins we have along the way in creating more employee happiness. It can be HR, it can be the head of HR, can be the chief happiness officer. But I also work with the Shell refinery here in Denmark, where one of the electricians took on the role of chief happiness officer and did a lot of cool things inside the organization. So I think that's hugely useful, to have somebody in charge of that process, a chief happiness officer. Doesn't need to have that title. I just happen to think it's a great title. I've been using it for over 20 years now. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, if you want if you want happiness initiatives that employees will like, maybe let the employees themselves come up with them, instead of just like have managers sitting somewhere in a room going, I'm sure they're gonna like this. Um, and you can do this in kind of in two ways. You could have like a happiness task force. I think that's a great idea. That's what they had at SEB Pension. Helena wasn't alone in creating these initiatives and implementing them. She created like a task force. People volunteered from different arms of the organization. They had like 400 employees, and they created a task force of, I think, 6 or 7 people, and they came up with a plan. They, came up with different initiatives, and they made sure that these initiatives were then implemented in different parts of the organization. And having this group of people who can meet regularly, schedule these events, come up with ideas that that they know people will like because they're part of the people, I think that just makes a lot of sense. So you can have this very structured approach to employee involvement, or you can be way more hands off. Here's another example. This is from an internet company in the UK called Pier 1 Hosting. And they had this thing where any employee at any time could spend up to £100 on anything they believe would create a better workplace. As an example, somebody bought space hoppers for the office. I think that's hilarious. So if somebody has an idea like, it's a hot day, I'll buy ice cream for my team, they can go out and do that. They don't need to ask for permission. They'll just come back with a receipt, and the money will be reimbursed. I think that is a fantastic example, and a great way to have, employees directly involved in creating more employee happiness. So that's tip number two. Involve employees in designing the happiness initiatives. Tip number three, so important, is to do the right things. If you want your initiatives to work, they have to be the right initiatives. Putting a gym in, I'm sorry to say that, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to have no effect. So what do we do instead? We're going to follow the research. And here's the thing, I already made a video on that. You can find it with the other webinars I've made, on the 5 most important things from the science of research. Here are some of the main points from this video. We need to focus less on satisfaction, more on happiness, and so on and so on and so on. Go watch that. That's where I refer to all of the research in this field. But most of all, I think if I could just summarize one point from that video, it's that we really, really need to look at happiness and not job satisfaction. And of course, happiness is created by results and relationships. And that brings me to tip number 4, which is here we go, don't forget results. As I said, our model of what makes people happy at work is that it's not about all the perks. It's not about pension plans. It's not about compensation, except of course that a compensation that is too low on unfair can make people unhappy at work. According to the research, if you boil it down to the essence, in our model, the things that make us happy at work are results and relationships. Results is doing a great job, being good at what you do, picking up new skills, knowing that your job makes a difference, knowing that your skills are valued, knowing that you contribute to a team or the customer, just knowing that you're good at what you do and you create a meaningful difference with your work. And then relationships is when you like the people you work with, and we have good relationships in our team, good relationship with our managers, that kind of thing. And what I've noticed is that in many, many workplaces, when they start thinking about happiness initiatives, it becomes very relationship oriented. Oh, I know. Let's have team breakfast every Monday morning. Let's have like Friday beers every Friday afternoon. Let's have pizza nights. Let's have movie nights. Let's have a party. And all of those things are great. They're a lot of fun. But they're all relationship oriented. They're great for that. they can really help create better relationships in our workplaces and teams. But not everybody cares that much about relationships. One of the smartest things I've heard people say is this quote by Hans-Erik Brønserud, who was the former CEO of one of the happiest workplaces in Denmark, a bank called Middelfart Sparekasse. And he said the only way to treat everybody the same is to treat everybody differently. So here's what you need to realize is that many people in the workplace are, I mean, relationships matter to them, but they're actually more results driven. So of course they want a good relationship with their coworkers, but more than anything else, the results oriented people, what makes them tick is being good at their work, making a difference, knowing that their skills are valued, maybe sharing their skills, maybe picking up new skills, maybe knowing that, I'm really, really good at my chosen profession. And in many workplaces, I've seen this mistake again and again. I think that's often why it fails. Everything they do to create more happiness at work becomes relationship oriented. So these people feel left out. There's nothing in there that really speaks to them. So we need things that are centered on results. I'll give you an example. This is from a tech company. I have a video on that on my YouTube channel. I'll link to it in the video materials here. This is from a tech company in Prague. Again, IT people, tech people, often very results oriented. And they created this internal academy where people could offer trainings in anything they felt they were good at, could share their knowledge, could be the expert and help others become even better. And it could be job related, or it could also be something like Spanish guitar or growing orchids or whatever. But this was great for the results oriented people. By the way, this also creates relationships. Because you get people together and talking about something, sharing something they care about, something they believe is important. So that's just one example. But my tip here, tip number 4, is don't sleep on results. Have plenty of initiatives that are also designed to give people the feeling that, we're good at our jobs, we make a difference, highlight results. Like, for instance, skill sharings, hackathons, that kind of thing. Tip number 5, and this is now really moving into the follow-up phase a little bit, is to share the good stories. And I think in many organizations, this can get a little dry in that, we had this, we have these initiatives. But I think if you want to communicate around your happiness initiatives, the best thing you can do is share positive stories about these initiatives. So not just there was a team breakfast, but there was a team breakfast and this person baked a cake and that was amazing. Or we had this hackathon and this group of people got together and created a solution in just 48 hours. And here's how amazing it was and how much fun they had along the way. So the more we can share these positive stories, the better. And I think one of the best examples I've seen of that is from a tech company in Chile. I went there to speak at a few conferences, and they had this culture book, which is basically like a book of positive stories for the last year. They publish a new one every year, and they have all of these stories here about, here's the bring your kids to work day, here's the volunteer for a charity day, here's the share your skills day, that kind of thing. So that's a great example. Oh, sorry. So that's a great example of sharing all of these positive stories. And this works through social proof. When people see these stories, so this team did this event and it had positive effects for them, that makes them want to do something similar. And it's much more effective than like telling people you should do something to create happiness at work. That kind of admonishment usually not very effective, but here's an amazing story, here's what happened. That is usually very effective. So the more you can do this, the more you can find the good stories of people doing things around the organization and how well it worked. The more you can share those stories, the more people, more likely people will be to participate in future events, in future initiatives. Also, in the follow-up phase, you gotta measure the effect, right? If you just do an initiative and then you forget all about it, I mean, what are you even doing? Why you're not measuring how happy people, you can measure two things, basically. You can measure the what people think about the event itself. So you went to this hackathon, how would you rate it? Did it make you feel better about your job? Did it give you new relationships in the workplace? That will be great. Or you can also measure the effect it has on people after. So can you, for instance, see a rise in people's employee happiness or in motivation or in retention or in absenteeism? And that, of course, requires that you actually measure happiness at work and that you actually ask employees about their opinions. And we have the perfect tool for that. You got to check it out. It's called Heart Count, and Heart Count is it's the damn best tool out there for measuring happiness at work. People get 3 questions every Friday. It takes like 10 seconds to respond. And you should absolutely try that out in your teams, in your workplace. You can find more information and book a demo at heartcount.com. Um, but you really, I think this, if you take happiness seriously, you got to measure the effect of different initiatives to see if they're, were they even worth it? Did people enjoy them? Did it make them happier at their jobs? Super important. Uh, Tip number 7. This is really important. Actually listen to your employees, and if something's not working or if something could be better, modify it. I mean, don't feel like you put this out there, you put a lot of work into this party or this initiative, and now people are ungrateful and they're not showing up. What's wrong with them? That's the wrong attitude. If people are not showing up for them, they're trying to communicate something to you. They're trying to tell you something, and you need to listen to that. I think a good example is from a company I visited in South Africa, and they told me that they had planned this party. Top management had, like, our employees have been working hard. They got great results. We want to show that we appreciate them. So they created this party. It was like very lavish deals, like an offsite, 2 hours drive outside of Cape Town at a luxury hotel. The idea was people would take buses there. They would sleep there, party, stay the night, and then drive back in buses the next day. Like hugely expensive, like a big deal. And so, the company announces this to the employees, and the employees are like, I guess that sounds great. They were like, there was no real enthusiasm. So they actually, again, they could have been like, ungrateful bastards. We're spending all this time and money on them, and they don't even want our big party. What's wrong? Um, but they didn't do that. So, they took this seriously, actually listened to the employees. The employees said, many of us have kids. We can't really stay the night. We prefer something in town. So that's what they did. They canceled that big luxury hotel, and then they had just a great party, just as great a party, but they had it in town so people could be home in their beds that night and be with their kids the next morning. I think that's a great example of, again, listening to your employees and modifying whatever initiative you are starting or you're doing or planning. I think another great example is, yes, the gym. I visited a company in New York called Next Jump. Their headquarters are on, used to be in the Empire State Building, actually. I was there. It was super cool. Now they're further down Fifth Avenue. And so they had, again, a lot of engineers, a lot of tech people not in very good shape. They put in a gym and nobody went. And again, they could say, oh my God, people are so ungrateful. Why don't they value our, we're trying to do nice things for them and they don't even go to the gym. What's wrong with people? But they didn't do that. They again say, if people are not going, they're trying to tell us something. That's communication. We need to take that seriously. And then they realized that, again, it's going to the gym alone is boring unless you're already a gym rat, in which case you can motivate yourself to do it. So they figured out, how do we make this? They tried to think, how do we make this a social activity? So instead of just having a gym, they actually put in like spinning classes where you go with your coworkers and you have a common activity. They had put in yoga classes. They even put in sleep classes where people could go and have like a half-hour nap, like a guided meditation kind of thing. And now now that creates relationships. You go together. You're not just alone there. And they also did a cool thing where you swipe your employee key card to get into the gym, and every time you do, you earn points for your team. So there's like which team has gone to the gym the most. That's results right there. Create a little bit of internal competition. So that's a great example of taking an initiative that was otherwise failing, and instead of just scrapping the gym, they could, like, we're going to remove the gym. Nobody goes anyway. You're so ungrateful. The investment was already made. So instead think, how do we make this so it creates results and relationships? And that's what you got to do with every single initiative you put in. Make sure that it's something that actually creates results and relationships. Um, cool. Tip number 8. You need management support. Yes. But even more than that, if you can get it, management participation is going to be amazing. Let's say you have the gym, right? I mean, management already supports it. They paid for it. But what if you could have, you know, top managers taking turns going to the spinning classes and yoga classes and sleep classes, that more than anything else would show employees that this is an okay use of your time. We actually want you to go to this. We're going to be there. We're going to show that we support it. And the best way to show that is to actually be there and participate yourselves. So how do you do that? How do you get management on board with this? I think there are three main things you can do. First of all, you can connect employee happiness to business results, right? Um, let's face it, like most managers are results oriented, right? They became top level managers because they believe that they can drive results and profits and growth and productivity and all of that. So the more you're sharp on how more employee happiness will actually boost business results, the better. And fortunately, I have a video on that. The last video I just made was on all the reasons why happy employees are more productivity, all the research behind that. So it's very easy. And I think if you want to make it extra relevant for the top level managers, what you can do is you can find their pain points, and then you can show how happiness at work, more happiness at work specifically can address those. So let's say that absenteeism is high in your organization. Maybe people are sick a lot. Maybe there's a lot of burnout. Well, you can, using the research, you can very clearly show that if employees are happy, there's less burnout. Let's say employee turnover is high and it's hard to find new skilled employees. Well, you can show very clearly that if employees are happy at work, they will stay longer in their jobs. Employee turnover and hiring costs will be lower. Maybe customer satisfaction is low. Well, then you can very clearly show that happy employees make the customers happy. Customers return, spend more money. So if you can figure out what top management pain points are, you can very clearly show how more happiness at work would help address those issues. And finally, one argument that I find also works really well is to show them that you can lower the bar, right? You're not trying to create the perfect workplace where everybody's happy all of the time. Maybe you're just trying to increase happiness at work by like 10%, right? And you can actually show them that it's fairly simple. Like the things that are going to work, the things that, again, according to the research, actually make people happier at work, don't have to be hugely expensive, like the gym, right? That easier things can actually make a huge difference. And then using that, you can then convince them, first of all, yes, please write the check, support this, give me the budget I need to do it, but also support it with your time, with your presence, with your energy. Be there for it. I mentioned the pension company, SEB Pension, earlier, and their CEO was completely behind this and made sure to participate in all of these events as often as he possibly could. And that's the kind of thing people notice. Tip number 9 is to also maybe let initiatives expire at some point. Maybe, you have this initiative, it works for a while, but then people just get accustomed to it. Maybe it doesn't need to run forever. Maybe things have their time, and then, you know what, we're going to run this for a year, and then we're going to let this stop and come up with something new. People do get accustomed to these things, and if you can introduce some newness, either modified in a new way or come up with something completely new, that can actually be a really, really good way to do it, and keep it fresh. It can be a little bit dangerous. I did a training in New York, and there was a lady there who was basically the chief happiness officer of a credit union. And she told me that they'd had this when she came in. They had this thing every Friday where there was cake. They got cakes delivered, and people could go to this room and grab themselves a slice of cake. And it was like nobody got anything out of that. It's not like people got together over a piece of cake and a cup of coffee and built relationships. It's more like some people went and just took a slice of cake back to their desk and sat there eating it alone. And every Friday there was so much cake left over that she had to throw out. So she canceled that event, and people became so upset. And she was now known as the lady who killed the cake. I'm not even kidding. And this is an example of loss aversion. Daniel Kahneman has described that really well in his research. Loss aversion basically means that we hate to lose anything. Even if we have something, even if we don't value it that much, it doesn't really make us happy. If somebody takes it away, it can make people really unhappy. So you have to be. I think that's a good reason to be careful what you introduce, because taking it away can be really hard. But the trick here can be to say, instead of you say you're taking it away, replace it with something else. Instead of saying, we're taking away the Friday cake, say we're replacing it with this thing instead, and here's why we're doing it. And that can help address address the loss aversion. But I will say that not all happiness initiatives are going to work forever. People change, a company changes, the culture changes. Don't expect this thing to run for 5 years. Be open to let these initiatives expire and then do something else later. And my final tip, tip number 10, it's really important. It's really tempting to think that, we really need people there for the party. It would be amazing if everybody went. So we're going to make it mandatory. Never do that, okay? Never force people to participate. It's just not gonna work. In fact, it's gonna create a lot of resentment. It's gonna create the wrong energy because now you have people there who just don't want to be there. People who would rather be home or with their kids or doing something else or not doing their actual jobs. Um, so don't do not make these events mandatory. These initiatives mandatory. Instead, make them so good, make them so relevant that people want to be there. And then not everybody's going to want to be there. Some people would prefer to do something else. And it's better that they're not there instead of forcing them to be there. So that's my 10th and final tip. And I have seen companies try to make these events, these types of events mandatory. And I think that's a terrible, terrible idea unless they're like perfectly work relevant. So these are my 10 tips for how we create happiness initiatives that actually make people happier, that actually where people want to participate and that actually makes them happier at work and therefore more productive and more effective in the workplace. If you have any questions, write a comment now and I will take those questions in a second. If you want more information, I have all of these sources as a website, our blog, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That will be amazing. And of course, we have our YouTube channel where I'm posting these videos and our free newsletter. I'm going to link to all of these materials and a lot of links about the research behind these topics that we talked about today. And of course, most of all, if you want more happiness at work in your workplace, the very best thing you can do is book me to come speak. In all modesty, I am pretty awesome at it. Our last 300 talks, I got a 9.6 rating on average out of 10, which I'm very, very proud of. So thank you so much for listening, and I will now see if there are any questions. All righty. I did get a couple of questions, and there are some very nice comments as well, very encouraging comments. Thanks for those. But the one question that I did get that I wanted to address was, what is the worst happiness initiative you've seen? Um, and trust me when I say I've seen some real stinkers. I spoke at a conference in Lisbon once, and there was a guy there who said like he couldn't understand why his employees weren't happy because he spent €1,000 on smoothies every month, and I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I did some leadership workshop for a big company in Budapest, and their HR team showed me like their binder of happiness initiatives. It was this thick, but it was all stuff like, so you get a discount in this store, you get a discount gym membership, you get a discount this and a discount that. Again, none of these were like conveniences, but none of this created results in relationships. So none of those are necessarily bad, but they're just not going to work. Um, and call me naive, but I think we should spend our time and money on stuff that actually works rather than stuff that doesn't work. That was the one question that I did get. Let me just check real quick and see if there are any others. No, that was it. And finally, I mentioned this, so just want to show you this is from the company in Chile that I spoke at. This is their culture book, El Valor de lo que tenemos, the value of what we have. And it's basically full of good stories from the past year in the organization, all of the nice things they've done, all of their happiness initiatives, volunteering, parties, everything they've done inside the organization. So again, this communicates that we do these things, people participate, these things make a difference. And that, more than admonishments, is likely to inspire people to participate in any future events. So thank you so much for listening and stay happy.